Yes, it is.
So I was thinking about Kickass the other day and decided to read the original comic book again. I also watched the film adaptation right after. I haven't gone through either since they were fairly new and only read the comic back then because the movie was announced. Kickass, the story of Dave Liszewski, was written by Mark Millar and in my opinion is a bit hit or miss as a writer. One of his more notable pieces being the original run of Old Man Logan, which if you haven't read that, shit rocks. Anyway, I remember enjoying the comic somewhat. It didn't completely click with me, but I respected the kind of story he and John Romita Jr. wanted to tell. And seeing trailers for the movie at the time, I noticed that besides the different costume designs, it looked pretty damn faithful. It was almost one-to-one from what I could make of a single viewing. Then I watched the film adaptation, directed and written by Matthew Vaughn, and I wasn't too thrilled in the end. Don't get me wrong, there's plenty to love about it. The cinematography was really good, the lighting and direction made the colors pop extremely well, most of the soundtrack added some real punch to the scenes, and each actor gave a fine performance. For the most part. You can tell everyone involved really cared about making a fun and exciting movie, and in the end, it is. There's also a couple scenes the film shares with the comic that excel in this adaptation.
What the fuck is wrong with you, man? You'd rather die for some piece of shit that you don't even fucking know? The three assholes laying into one guy while everybody else watches? Yeah, I'd rather die. So bring it on!
However, I feel like the movie misses a huge part of Kickass that made it such a moving story in the first place. At least, in my opinion. And seeing as how the film's production began before the first issue of Millar's comic even came out, I can see why it ended up being so different. And I have to stress, I'm not hating on the movie just because it wasn't one-to-one with the original source. I don't even hate it, really. Plenty of films based off of existing properties deviate from the source material and benefit immensely in various ways. One of the best examples of that is probably Scott Pilgrim vs. the World, but I'm not gonna talk about that. The point is, I always like to have an open mind for adaptations to comics or otherwise, as long as the appeal of those characters I'm familiar with is still there. And that is the one thing I think was completely missing from the Kick-Ass movie, at least after the first act. What really separated the film from the lovingly dubbed cape shit at the time, perhaps still helps it stick out from the rest, is that the story is centered around a handful of psychos wanting to be superheroes, so they take the law into their own hands, some with strength, money, raw passion, or all of the above. And while the bare bones concept can probably be compared to something like Batman, that franchise tends to pit everyone's favorite back-cowled hero against mutated supervillains with access to unrealistic weaponry or plans that barely have any grip on reality. Kick-Ass is an overall more grounded story, although I think the likes of Vaughn and co-writer Jane Goldman were aware of the comparison.
This fucking guy comes out of nowhere, kicks our asses, and steals all the coke.
This would be the guy that looks like Batman.
I didn't say he looked like Batman.
You did, Trey. You said the guy looked like Batman.
I said like a mask and stuff. And a cape?
Yeah, like Batman.
I didn't say like Batman. I never said Batman.
Also, keep in mind that I'll be discussing the comic and film assuming everyone watching has experienced at least the latter. Spoiler territory from here on out, and while I will have context from the comic on screen while discussing it, I won't have it up for that long. So either you're familiar with the material or you don't mind pausing the video to read the panels from time to time. Still, it'd be better if you read it for yourself. It's only 8 issues after all. As I've said before, the first act is considerably great while being accurate to the comic with nearly every beat. Then it just kind of falls apart and tumbles away in a narrative sense. I think the flaws I perceive in its storytelling all relate to one thing that really separates the film from the comic. Something I didn't notice back when I was a teenager reading it, therefore I didn't even take the lack of it into account when I first saw the film. The point of the entire story is, the main characters are all pathetic, downtrodden losers, especially Kick-Ass himself. Let me explain. I think Mark Millar wrote the characters the way he did because he's interested in what the comic world is like for a pathetic person, a loser, a failure, a deadbeat, a Melvin, a screw-up, all while trying to be a superhero with their own wit and human ability. No radioactive spider, no inherited mutant powers, no chemical vat, no infinite amount of money or guns to help you become said superhero, and even if you did make a difference out there, you haven't made any real progress in your actual life. The downtrodden luck of our wetsuit hero bleeds onto the people he ends up meeting and tries to befriend. I am, of course, talking about Hit Girl and Big Daddy, which I'll discuss as well. The writer and director of the film were in close contact with Miller during production. Early development can be traced back to around when the first couple issues are being released. I think this explains why the first act is fairly close to how the comic was presented. However, right after that, it goes down a very different direction that changes the characters almost completely, and the story itself unfolds in a way I didn't find satisfying. This all comes back to the fact that the characters aren't believable and the world, or should I say the script, is too concerned about making them not look pathetic. To a fault, I think. It felt like Vaughn and Goldman were well aware of just how lovingly terrible these characters were in the comics and thought, oh, that won't do for a movie, no sir, which is what bothered me so much about this adaptation. It felt much softer, despite the film being full of explicit violence. It was the satirical bite of the story that was missing, making for a more dull experience. We'll look at each of the characters respectively now, starting with the titular protagonist.
You are fucking awesome.
Dave Lazuski, or Kickass, was depicted as a complete putz in the comic. Ugly, boring personality, and not even a nerd in the sense that he's smart. In fact, he's dumb as hell. Even the introduction to his crush, Katie Doma, had a very harsh tone right from the start. She justifiably tells him off as she's disgusted by his attempt to stalk her. I think it's pretty funny how the comic sets up the main character's crush with such a horribly negative tone. Like, yeah, no way they're ever hooking up. But in the film, they play off their first on-screen interaction like, oh, awkward kid looks silly now, hee.
Hey, gorgeous.
Hey. Oh, no, Erica. I know. I knew that.
It's something right out of a typical rom-com, not even an ounce of harshness. Something else I wasn't wild about was the aftermath of Dave's first attempt at being a hero. He gets messed up pretty badly, nailed by a car, and sent to the hospital. In the film, he still gets his shit kicked in, but the aftermath is severely downplayed. His dad's job must have a killer health insurance plan in the movies world.
This is awesome. I look like freaking Wolverine.
They still have that metal detector at your school?
Yeah? It's gonna have a meltdown.
No ghost of a late mother or guilt over piling bills to be seen. Otherwise, I have no real issues with the first act. Well, regarding Dave as a character. Never mind Katie, a high school student who apparently was dating a guy nearly twice her age because they felt like removing a minor character.
You know what? I was seriously thinking of mailing his site. I mean, I could really use some help from a guy like that right now. You know, I volunteer at the Needle Exchange. Well, there's this one guy, Razul, and I felt so sorry for him, and the more I found out about his upbringing and stuff,
This particular lame duck of hers turned out to be more of a lame cobra. She didn't want the money back that she'd given him, or an apology for the black eye he'd given her. She just wanted him to get that they were through, and leave her alone.
Maybe I need to consider that typical Hollywood doesn't really think this is creepy. The second act is where I really start to get bugged by the differences. In the comic, Dave has inner monologues throughout, as expected from this medium. In both versions, Katie befriends Dave unexpectedly, believing the rumor that Dave was mugged and beat due to his supposed homosexuality. He plays along with this non-truth as a way to spend time with Katie out of absolute desperation to breathe the same air as her, and she's none the wiser, thinking he has no friends to open up with about his supposed orientation. Throughout these scenarios in the comic, he's very self-deprecating for pulling this act on her. While he was heavily ashamed of his actions, he has so little self-esteem and is hopelessly horny for Katie that he won't change anything about it. In the film, Dave is surprisingly quiet when it comes to doing the exact same thing. They portray it in a lighthearted, almost comical sense.
ever since I was little, I've always wanted a friend like you. Is it okay to say that? I mean, that's not homophobic, is it?
course not. No.
Thank you.
The time they spend together is also considerably more sexualized, and we never hear his thoughts on the matter throughout the film, given only the excuses he makes for his behavior.
So, how are things going with Katie?
Oh, just peachy. He had a sleepover and spent the whole night watching the entire Ugly Betty box set. Did pedicures.
I'm telling you, the longer you wait, the worse it's gonna get.
I know. I was gonna tell her, just she seems so happy. I don't know when's the right time.
While we're on the relationship between Dave and Katie, his assumed orientation was the only reason the two became friends at all. Perhaps a hint towards Katie's vain personality or desire to help those in need. The two had no mutual hobbies, opinions, or interests. Also, Dave is ugly. Rules of nature, punk. Anything Katie can relate to with Dave was merely a lie. Meanwhile, in the film, they share a mutual interest in comics where she even takes up Dave's recommendations.
So you don't actually read comics.
Yeah, I just started. I got recommended some, like Scott Pilgrim and Shoujo Beat, that kind of thing. Oh, hey, I read those old Ditko Spider-Mans you gave me. They're actually pretty good.
On top of that, the comic book store Dave frequents in both versions of the story gets converted into a coffee shop hybrid for the film, just to give her and another female character, who has no character, a reason to hang out with Dave and his dork-ass friends. I'm not saying women don't like to go to comic shops that just sell nerd shit. The filmmakers are. It's just funny to me that they felt the need to make the store sell bubble tea in order to make it believable that a couple of girls would spend more than a few seconds talking to these goobers. The biggest difference between these two when it comes to the comic and the film is when Dave spills the beans to her. For the comic, he chickens out of his initial attempt, and only makes a confession at the end of the story. He doesn't tell her that he's Kickass, but he does admit that he was never really gay, but actually in love with her. And how does she take it? Exactly like any regular human being should expect her to. She flips out, initiating her actual boyfriend to give his metal plates a good vibe check. While I'm sure people are used to the sexist trope of the hero earning his reward at the end of his adventure, Miller even decides to deny this from our protagonist. Hell, in the end, the only one that gets laid is his dad. Hardworking man meeting a nice woman and being honest with her. Of course he gets to smack the bottom like flip-flops while our pitiful, lying, manipulative husk of a protagonist stumbles into his room alone and goes full-on simp like the loser he is. Oh, but you can't have that for the movie? Oh, no, it's too mean, said Matthew Vaughn, probably. Too mean for the movie about crazy people slaughtering mobsters. Dave spills everything at the end of the second act, and Katie just falls head over heels for this guy who was lying about his sexuality just to be a creep. Katie wasn't exactly a deep character in the comic, but Jesus, at least she served as a hilarious catalyst to a great payoff for people tired of the typical hero gets the girl story. So if you're going to get rid of that, you might as well throw away the entire character too. Now she's just a prop in the movie, a hollow shell that Dave gets to stick his dick in to make the audience happy. It's kind of disgusting, really. There's other issues I have that relate to Dave as a character, but we'll get into those as they're more important to the characters he interacts with. The film's depiction of Dave Kickass Lazowski wasn't entirely off. There were times throughout where I felt he was that dumb chud who wanted to be a superhero, even if he doesn't really look like a chud to begin with. Hollywood is usually too scared to cast a fugly dude as the protagonist, so I'm not surprised. Even so, I remember people perceived his unimportance halfway through the film as a flaw. A lot of people said the movie should have been called Hit Girl since she basically steals the show and gets everything done in the end. But that's the point, I think. Even in his own story where his alias is the title, he gets usurped by a much more capable person. That's just how much of a complete loser he is. I guess I can say, even in the end, the movie got that right.
Okay, you cunts. Let's see what you can do now.
Hit Girl and Big Daddy, or Mindy and Damon McCready, had a very different dynamic between these two versions while appearing similar at a surface level. Crazy ex-cop whose wife was killed by the Russian mob raises his daughter to become a cold-blooded killer just like him, working together to take down said mob as an act of sheer revenge. However, as far as I can tell, the similarities end there. They hit us with the duo's beginnings much earlier than the comic did, which is fine. In fact, the first scene with them is a damn good recreation.
Daddy, I'm scared.
Come on, Mindy, honey. Be a big girl now. There's nothing to be afraid of.
Is it gonna hurt bad?
Oh, child. Only for a second, sugar. So at close range like this, the force is gonna take you off your feet for sure, but it's really no more painful than a punch in the chest.
I hate getting punched in the chest.
You're gonna be fine, baby doll. Kind of fun, huh? Now you know how it feels. You won't be scared when some junky asshole pulls a Glock.
I wouldn't have been scared anyways.
That's my girl. All right.
The only garish difference is Damon McCready, or Big Daddy, isn't really the stoic wall of a man like in the comic, and Hit Girl doesn't seem as lovingly attached to him as a father. The movie skips over his very particular political views, but if you think I'm going to touch that, you're crazy. In fact, Damon, portrayed by Nicolas Cage, is much more lighthearted and is seen as kind of a goofball.
Oh, child. You always knock me for a loop.
He keeps calling her child, and that's odd to me, but I don't know, maybe it's some weird Midwest thing. Sometimes he's considerably cringy, where even his daughter, Mindy, isn't amused by him.
You know what? Everyone likes Kickass. Did you see the clip? It was actually pretty good.
Good at getting his ass kicked. He should call himself Ass Kick instead.
That doesn't even make sense.
I also really didn't care for the inflection he was forcing whenever in disguise. I'm not sure if it was impersonating West or Shatner, but I don't care.
Thank you. Let's call it insurance. Makes it easier for us to take your word. See, we like you, but we don't trust you.
It was distracting, and I was having a hard time taking his character seriously. I think that's important for later on. In the comic, we're treated to the origin of Hit Girl and Big Daddy, and it's a pretty by-the-book revenge story that's copied for the film, but the big twist in the comic is that Damon made the whole thing up. This was actually a really harrowing moment. The revenge plot against the Russian mafia was just fabricated by a beefy accountant with a pristine comic collection, selling off individual issues in order to afford this insane hobby he created for himself and his daughter. Damon couldn't stand the idea of being a mediocre salaryman with a mediocre daughter, so he had to force his way into being some kind of hero, even if he was avoiding public recognition. A certain someone would say Damon was slightly bored and severely confused. But anyway, the comic managed to bring him down to the lowest example of a human being, unveiling his psychotic revenge plot into this pitiful dream he had just trying to be somebody while roping his daughter into the whole thing. Honestly, this is straight up child abuse. And that was a huge reason why I even remembered this comic. There's probably a line in the sand to how Damon manipulated his daughter into believing this crap if the revenge story was legitimate, right? At least for a comic book story. But no, this revelation basically confirmed that from the very beginning that this superhero was actually a huge piece of shit. The only thing slightly redeeming him is that he killed mobsters, but whatever. I think the ends justifying the means can be a whole other conversation. And how does Damon meet his end? He gets put down like a mangy mutt, on his knees right in front of Dave. No dramatic exit, no last words, just split open by a bullet like any other typical human. He left this world in ridicule, a complete failure with nothing to survive him besides a damaged daughter. In the film, they completely do away with this big twist and instead make it that Damon was a cop framed for drug possession because he was trying to take down the mob. So it's mostly the same as the comic, except as far as the movie is willing to tell us, none of it was a lie. Again, this goes back to what feels like Vaughn not wanting to make the characters so sad or pitiful. I would have liked to see how mortifying that moment would have been for regular movie audiences. The twist of Damon making the whole thing up would probably be enough for people to stupidly decide the movie just isn't good. A missed situation, if you will. It's a shame because they really make you think for a brief moment that Damon really was making the whole mob story up, but that's quickly shooed away.
Is that how you brainwashed Mindy? You say brainwashed, I say made it into a game.
You call this playing, Damon? Vigilante justice, mass murder, come on, partner.
You know I'm not gonna stop. Not till D'Amico and his whole damn operation are burnt to ashes and buried.
It ain't gonna bring her back, Damon.
I don't know, I would have loved to see what people thought of this guy being so insanely selfish because all he wanted to do was play hero and make his daughter appear cool. Instead, the film plays it safe and by the book, removing the elements from the character that made him so interesting. The moment of Big Daddy and Kickass's ruination plays out much differently in the film. Besides the torture scene they make Dave endure, while more believable than a car battery to the scrotum, has less impact to it.
It's batons. We're gonna show you what they can do. Go ahead, boys.
Yeah, real convincing. Hit Girl still dives in to take the goons down and saves Dave, and is considerably too late to save her dad as well. They share a moment in the film as he's slowly burning, and I guess he's just dying. I don't know shit about burns. The worst burn I got was an iron on my arm. Any pyro experts in the comments? Anyway, Damon gets to have some kind of heroic send-off to his daughter.
I'm so proud of you, Gary.
Alright. Still, I don't care for this character since I was unable to take him seriously throughout the entire film, so this scene did absolutely nothing for me. Hit Girl up to this point was pretty accurate, so no real complaints from her early scenes. However, in the comic, she doesn't take a moment to pay respects to her father in the third act, despite that he's a motionless corpse right next to her. Mindy knows she has a job that needs to get done. She hoofs straight up cocaine, I think, and extinguishes the goddamn mafia practically by herself. Dave is there to help Hit Girl at a crucial moment, and she promptly finishes off Genevieve, the mob boss, without hesitation. She had no desire to savor the moment, no need to try and make this look cool. This isn't the time for that. Once Mindy got the job done is when she let her guard down to the only person left that she can trust. Perhaps pathetic is too harsh a term for this moment, but I can certainly call it human. It's both sad and beautiful. As for the movie... this couldn't feel less appropriate for a penultimate confrontation. Of course, now she's tearing through the entire mafia horde because reasons, and Kickass gets some stupid jetpack with mounted miniguns. Can this be any more epic? Yes, with Dave saving the day using a rocket launcher to the mob boss's crotch. God, this is so stupid, and it's hard to believe this movie started the way it did. I guess since Hit Girl already showed her vulnerability to Damon, they didn't really let her and Kickass have that moment in the same essence. Speaking a little bit more on this duo, and adding a bit more to Kickass's absolutely pathetic nature, Miller has said that the original draft for this series had Hit Girl as the main character, but realized he wrote her up as too capable, thus no real drama about her being put in tight situations.
Funnily enough, when I first came up with Kickass, it was originally about Hit Girl. Kickass wasn't in it originally. When I first put it together in 2006, a couple of years before it came out, I was doing this thing called Big Daddy and Hit Girl. And I felt she was too much of a outrageous character to be the lead, so there was no drama. So I had to create another character, because I wrote two issues where it was just Hit Girl, and I thought, no, this isn't right. I'm never worried about her because I know she can take care of it. She's the person who comes in and solves the problem. Imagine Star Wars had been about Han Solo. You wouldn't have been that worried. You had to have the farm boy learning how to become a hero. So then I wrote Kickass, I created him, and then took him on that journey instead.
He needed a monkey wrench for this story, a hindrance, an obstruction, someone that is so incompetent and downtrodden that they'll bring down Hit Girl and Big Daddy to his own patheticness. Thus, Dave Lazuski was born, and ended up as the titular protagonist. I feel this supports my theory that the point of Kickass was to portray what happens when a complete loser tries to be a superhero but fails to escape their status in their own life.
As a great man once said, wait till they get a load of me.
There isn't a whole lot to say about Chris, or Red Mist, the partner turned antagonist who's the son of a Russian mob boss, John Genovese. In the film, they're replaced with an Italian mob and John is renamed Frank D'Amico. Not sure why they made this change, but whatever. For simplicity's sake, John and Frank will both be referred to as Mob Boss. When it comes to depicting Chris as the partner who is hiding a planned backstab bit, it's pretty much one-to-one, and I will say the film gave Red Mist much more character than the comic did. However, I don't think the change enhanced the narrative at all. I'm referring to the idea of letting the audience know from the start what Red Mist's background and intentions were. In fact, I feel like all that did was deflate the entire conflict he rains down upon them.
There's only one way a superhero can trust a stranger, and I can be that stranger. You just gotta give me a chance. I know I can do it. I just need a few things.
Am I crazy? Was I supposed to think that Chris ever had second thoughts? I guess it isn't fair for me to say because I read the comic before watching the movie, but I don't think the movie alluded for even a second that he would turn his back on his dad for any sort of reason. As soon as the meeting was set up, you knew immediately that he was going to attack Hit Girl and Big Daddy, which he does. It was predictable where the comic was unexpected. This is mainly because the comic obscured Red Mist's identity by leaving Chris as a background character that was only relevant for like a single page. The point of Red Mist in the comic was not only to provide one great twist among plenty, but also serve as a counter to Dave. While becoming a masked vigilante as a way to lure the ones that were messing with his father's business, he doesn't actually have the balls to commit to the role, even if he wanted to. While Kickass was taking on entire gangs by himself, all of Red Mist's acts of valor were completely fabricated from the start. He showed nothing but reluctance when the time called for courage, as exemplified in the scenario where he and Dave run into a burning building in order to save someone's cat. This was the point of the scenario to begin with, and possibly a small hint of Red Mist's actual background. While Dave has no problem running into a burning building head-on in order to save someone, at least he thought it was someone and not a cat, Chris here was too scared to even enter the building, only pushed by Dave to do so. This scenario sort of makes it into the movie, but the roles have switched in order to cater to the plot point this burning lumber house served, a front for the mob now destroyed by an unknown vigilante who ended up being Big Daddy.
Hey, what are you doing? There are people in there! Should we call the fire? Shit!
While it made sense for Chris to run inside in order to find evidence of the slaying, I'm not sure why they made Dave look like the coward instead, since it doesn't even go with this version of his character. This moment feels like a half-assed, shallow attempt at copying a moment from the comic. But back to Red Mist. A big change comes from the showdown between him and Dave at the end of the story. Chris cowers in the shitter as the mob locks the building down until Hit Girl is dealt with. Kickass is immediately calling out Red Mist for one last fight. Chris obliges with a gun to his face. Rather than being at level, Red Mist is easily above Kickass in this confrontation regarding sheer power. At any moment, he can pull the trigger and end his story. But Dave sees right past this facade as he knows Chris's true character, a complete coward to the very end who doesn't have the guts to actually kill someone. It doesn't take more than a few swings to bring this wimp down, a truly pitiful son to a crime lord. The movie? Oh, it just ends with some bootleg martial arts where they somehow knock each other out at the same time? Are they being portrayed as equals now? Why? It would make a lot more sense for the film to portray Red Mist as lower than Kickass here, seeing as how everything he built to tower his reputation over Kickass was a complete lie. Even in this film, he's a completely pathetic shithead still. So this fight sucks. I will say the portrayal of the mob goons was an all-around improvement for this adaptation. They didn't have any real character in the comic, so I feel emphasizing on a select few of them for the film was done to simply add character to the villain, as well as make the story more full-fledged that'll fill up the feature-length runtime. And I'm perfectly fine with that. They provided a more human side to these goons, even with their complete incompetency, for comedic effect.
Why can't I have a gun? I'm a security guard.
You're a doorman now. You don't get a gun no more.
Look at me, I look like a putz.
You look sharp. Look at all them buttons. Do your job. Open the fucking door.
It made them feel less like faceless fodder. Mob Boss also had a lot more personality in the film, where in the comic he didn't really get that much attention. If you're going to make Chris more of a character for his adaptation, it only makes sense that his dad gets more fleshed out as well.
Sorry I had to wait, buddy.
The movie is starting in 10 minutes.
It's okay, we're cool. We're only gonna miss the trailers.
Yeah, but I want to get some popcorn.
When we get in there, get Chris some popcorn, okay? What do you want to drink? You want a Pepsi?
Yeah, that's fine.
Get him a Pepsi, and I'll have an icy. Mixed. Like when they mix the red one and the blue one.
Their character added more to the scenario, such as wanting to livestream Kickass's death in order to send a message to anyone wanting to be a superhero like him. I wouldn't say this was stellar writing or anything, but I think giving more attention to the main villain was a great addition. It makes their downfall more satisfying in the end, while adding some levity to the situation. So for the kind of film this ended up being, it's well done. Part of the point of Kickass as a comic is that the characters were doing things considerably reckless and psychotic, and yet they were able to inspire a lot of people to be more open about their want for justice and dream about being a crime fighter themselves. Perhaps they're trying to say that you should be as true to yourself as you can, both inside and out. Even if a lot of people just play pretend at home, possibly a light jab at how the majority of people treat social movements in modern times. It was kind of sweet and uplifting to see someone like Dave inspire so many people around the world. From what I understand, that springboarded the impersonators that would become the focus of the series after Dave, but I don't know, I didn't like Kick-Ass 2 very much and didn't really read anything beyond that. I mean, this was the point of our wing malfunctioned hero in the very beginning, one of the many folks Kick-Ass inspired, but the film adaptation didn't really emphasize that, especially since the punchline at the end was missing in the film and they removed the whole malfunction joke and in turn just makes him look even dumber. Or suicidal? I don't know. I always felt the point of this minimal character was that his death wasn't exactly caused by his mental health, so he could potentially have been a successful hero, emphasizing how mentally deficient the more typical heroes considerably are. The director and writers took this scene without any of its original substance. I know it's weird how much I'm harping on this nameless character, but I think it's important to explain this. The movie never really depicts anyone Kick-Ass inspired, so this aspect of the story is completely gone. There was a perfect opportunity when showing how viral the footage of his fight got, where it even attracted talk show hosts. I don't think that one guy who copied his outfit really counts either, because it looked more like he was for vanity, and possibly some job?
What kind of children's entertainer is that? Huh? What kind of kid has a Spider-Man party? Sure, but a fucking kick-ass party? Mommy, I want a kick-ass party. Dumb little fuck.
Kick-Ass was a story about putting on a mask and trying to support the city you're a part of, your society. Even if you're an idiot with no superpowers or even high-end technology. It would have been nice to see more of the townsfolk showing appreciation for Kick-Ass, to be inspired by him.
Hey, that's right, we're superheroes. Love us.
That's why those scenes from the first two Spider-Man films with random citizens helping him were so moving. The people loved what he was doing and wanted to express that love. The Kick-Ass comic took this in a different approach. Makes sense since the heroes that got popular didn't have any superhuman abilities, but the aspect of how the townsfolk took to Kick-Ass was missing almost entirely in the film. It makes the story of a sorry loser turned superhero overall weaker to me. Perhaps it was too human for this film.
How come nobody's ever tried to be a superhero?
Well, I don't know. Probably because it's fucking impossible, dipshit.
What?
I guess at this point some might be wondering, why did I compare these two in this way? Does the movie really lose so much value in not portraying the main characters as complete downtrodden losers? Not necessarily. The setting of ragtag maniacs dressing up and punching crime in the face is a fun one. I just don't see the story to be nearly as compelling in their lens, and wanted to decipher why. The film certainly has its own merits, but the way it repurposes this story feels like Vaughn and Goldman only did so in order to make it more accessible, and that's an action I just can't really get behind. They wanted to fluff it up and get rid of the grounded doses of reality and bite the original comic had. This is the kind of Hollywood production I see lampooned in satirical television shows.
Did you guys cut the Nixon scene? The Nixon scene is the core of the whole movie, where we see Secretariat be morally corrupted and get to look into the real darkness of his soul.
It's still all that, except now it happens while you give a Christmas present to your adorable nieces and then they hug you while your butt is stuck in a chimney.
Is one of the nieces Nixon?
Over hiatus, we ran a focus group. Turns out people don't want all that controversial stuff.
No rock bottom loser jerking it to cell phone screenshots, no lingering memories of your life being a complete lie, no fallen villain looked down upon by some someone even less capable, everyone is happy, everyone is badass, everyone gets a girlfriend. Whoop-dee shit. Still, I'm not sure how much I really want to defend the comic since it's kind of try-hard in some ways. I theorize some of this is just due to Dave being a kid. Not sure how much Miller put that into account. A lot of this is omitted from the film, by the way.
And who knows, buddy? This might even get you laid. No, not if she thinks he's gay, Todd. You fucking retard.
But I don't know, I'd rather take this salty, saucy take on stupid psycho kid wanting to be a crime fighter, leaving with fried balls, over the epic rooftop minigun kill fest the film devolved into. I'm also not one to believe that a piece of entertainment needs to fit the same politics you personally support in order for you to enjoy it. Miller himself even expressed how different this adaptation was from the original comic, which is interesting.
I don't really do happy endings, so there's a huge difference. In the movie, Matthew really wanted the lead to get the girl, whereas in the comic, this guy is a loser and he pretends to be gay because he wants to have sex with her. In the comic, when he confesses, she tells him to fuck off. In the movie, Matthew has them having sex.
Am I going too hard on the film? Is this angle of Kickass I perceive not fitting for something like a blockbuster film? Perhaps. The comic itself even takes a moment to comment about adaptations and argue there are things that just aren't fitting for the big screen. Perhaps Miller was already expressing what he thought of the upcoming film, and he seems happy with what they came up with anyway. I also have to emphasize that I don't mind changes if it doesn't take away from the characters or what they represent. And I understand some things need to change when it's being handled in a different medium. I just feel like they took a bit too much away, and some of it feels unnecessary. Dissimilar to Kick-Ass 2, where you compare the comic with the film and think, yeah, of course this kind of shit won't be in the movie.
Shit. What's wrong? God, okay, I'm not in the mood.
I don't have too much to say about anything past book 1, nor the movie sequel. Maybe if people dig this video, I'll take the time to read and watch them respectively and give thoughts. But I felt the comic was slathered with try-hard, edgy crap. Apparently Miller has a tendency to fall into those holes when he writes. And it's not like the original run of Kick-Ass avoided that. Kick-Ass 2 as a film wasn't horrid from what I remember, but nothing about it stuck with me. However, this could change if I end up watching it again. Apparently there's a series that serves as an extension to Kick-Ass, inspiring other folks to become crime fighters. This newer protagonist even dons the same outfit. And there's apparently a reboot planned by Matthew Vaughn, the original film's director, but it can't even start production for another couple of years due to copyright issues. Obviously no information yet whether it'll simply retell Lazowski's origin or focus on something else entirely. But back to what I was saying, the reason I like that aspect of the characters being completely pathetic is that it made them human. It made them more relatable. And with that, the entire story felt more real, so it resonated with me. Dumpster sex, Joan Jett, and Gatling guns don't really resonate with me as much. While obviously not everything needs to be relatable in the world of entertainment, it's something I think more people appreciate than they're given credit for. I always thought that's why children love things like Peanuts or Diary of a Wimpy Kid. At a surface level, yeah, their stories are pretty depressing, but clearly there's something about their pathetic nature that people tend to adore, or at least enjoy. There's a sense of identifying that character, and so viewers, readers, etc. bond with that character much more. It's cool that in a world of power fantasy like comic books, we got these grounded and believable characters, so the film siphoning most of that out of Dave, Mindy, Damon, and Chris was simply a bad move, at least in my opinion. Still, even with that, the film showcased something at least slightly more believable than an Iron Man or a Dark Knight, which were popping off at the time. While it didn't make insane waves in the box office, it made enough noise to show that people enjoy stories of more believable whack jobs wanting to be goddamn superheroes. And more likely, it sounded out that ticket buyers don't mind if some of these cape flicks are rated R, thus allowing more creative freedom in these kinds of productions. Thanks for watching.